Good afternoon, everyone. I am Wafiq El-Deiry. I'm a physician scientist, medical oncologist who is at Brown University. I'm the head of the Cancer Center there. I wear a few other hats. I'm an American Cancer Society professor, and I see a bunch of people more than the age of 45. So you should all talk to your doctor about getting your colonoscopy. I'm known in the field for a couple of things. About 30 years ago, I was at Johns Hopkins, just up the road, discovered a gene. It's called WAF1, which has some resemblance to my name. And I've lived with that for 30 years, thinking I would never do anything else that's important. But my lab that has studied tumor suppressor genes, including p53, which is the most commonly mutated gene in cancer, has found connections with the innate immune system, and eventually we discovered a drug that boosts the innate immune system, a small molecule drug. It got tested in clinical trials, and I'm happy to say it was approved by the FDA last August, the first ever approval for these aggressive middle-of-the-brain cancers with a specific mutation. Now, when the COVID pandemic started, we started hearing things like research is non-essential. You know, if you run a lab, just kind of wait until we fix this. And, you know, I've run a lab for 30 years, and that didn't sit well with me. We do have expertise on FDA-approved drugs and how they work, and inflammation and things, you know, I've studied in my career as an oncologist and cancer researcher. So we started doing some research. What could we do back in 2020? And we discovered a class of drugs that suppresses ACE2 expression. This is the molecule that the virus uses to infect cells. And by the way, remdesivir increases ACE2 expression. We published that in the middle of 2020. And, you know, toward the end of 2020, nobody cared about this type of research because we had vaccines. As a medical doctor, it was scary. I was glad there were vaccines. I had no choice but to take it to just do my work. But I was happy, you know, to do that. And I've been subsequently labeled as an anti-vaxxer, which is incorrect. You know, vaccines can help if they're safe and effective. And so fast forward, all along, you know, we know viruses can cause cancer. They're well-documented examples, human papillomavirus, for example. Some are more controversial, but the idea that a virus can cause cancer was not foreign to me. And so early on, I wanted to look into whether there's any relationship between COVID infection and cancer. And of course, because I have a one-track mind, p53 is the center of the universe. So I got to doing those studies and published a paper by April of 24 that the spike protein that was just mentioned suppresses the activity of p53. I've studied this protein for 30 years. I've discovered how what genes it turns on, and when you overexpress spike, you attenuate this, and you make cells that overexpress spike more resistant to chemotherapy, like cisplatin or 5-fluorouracil we used to treat cancer. This was published, and I came under a severe and horrible attack, and I was just doing some science and reporting what we found, and I thought we were very balanced in the reporting and the discussion of the work. For example, if you're developing a vaccine, you want to make sure it boosts the immune system and does what it's designed for, but you'd like to limit collateral damage to host defenses against all kinds of things, including cancer. So that would be a lesson learned from that type of work, but it still came under attack. I came under attack. By the middle of 25, I was invited to serve on the COVID immunization working group that reports to ACIP, the advisory group on immunizations that reports to the CDC. And at the time, I was, I think, invited because of my expertise in cancer, because that's potentially something that's there. But also, I am a medical doctor. I've done clinical research. I have very familiar with approvals and informed consent. And so I agreed to do this. And over the summer and fall of 25, dug into the world's literature on anything and everything we know about COVID infection, COVID vaccines, and cancer, and we found stuff. We found a bunch of reports, case series, a few population studies, no reliable population studies in the United States, but the cases are there, like sarcoma that develops in the arm, right where you've done the injection after more than one vaccine dose, or more than what I would expect for lymphomas. Again, cells that are present, that are circulating where injections are done. So there was a temporal association between injections of mRNA vaccines and subsequent development of cancer, but there was also a spatial component. It happens here, it happens in the head and neck, or breast cancer, or brain cancer. Multiple cancers have been described. And so, I worked with my colleagues, including Dr. Cooper-Wasser, who should have been here today but couldn't make it, and we reported to the working group, we reported to the ACIP our findings, and our findings related to, we were glad a vaccine might be available, but then some unexpected things emerged. Things that were unexpected, about its biodistribution, how long it lasts, some side effects that I think we're all talking about today, and then some science about what happens with multiple shots as far as the immune response, and then some biology of the vaccine because it's modified RNA. The modification of RNA with pseudouridine won the Nobel Prize a few years ago. It was a breakthrough because RNA, normally you breathe on it, it degrades and goes away. When it's modified with pseudouridine, it's stable. Dr. Bhattacharya has said for a couple of years now, we don't know what the dose is, we don't know what the distribution is. You can't turn it off. You don't know where it goes, and so there's a lot of emerging literature around this. And so, in our report, we ended up identifying gaps in knowledge, including epidemiologic data as well as forensic data. I totally agree with measuring spike levels in the blood. I mean, it's not such a foreign thing to have a viral antigen test. We do this for a lot of different, hepatitis and you name it. But our tests are more sophisticated. We can look for the spike antigen, but we can also look for nucleocapsid protein, which comes from the virus. So you could tell the difference between viral infection or vaccine with a test that could be done on blood, it could be done on tumor tissue, and by the way, there are cases of cancer where spike has been found, nucleocapsid has not been found. We published a report in January in a journal called Oncotarget, and the attacks on me escalated, the attacks on the journal with a cyber attack. It was shut down. You know, people were interested in reading this. They couldn't access it as a published paper. And by way of a disclaimer, I'm the editor of that journal. So I think that was probably ultimately, I had nothing to do with the review or the decision, but I think you know, few journals would publish such a report. And we published it so that people would know this is out there. And, you know, by the way, after it was published, I was contacted by a representative of the government of Japan, somebody who has been in the government for at least 10 years, and he said, I am so thankful you published this, because he personally had a lymphoma 3 years ago that metastasized to his tonsil, and he had that biopsied, and they found spike and no nucleic capsid protein. Tumors shouldn't have spike. There should be no spike there. That's a gap in our knowledge where we really need much more of that. And then there are other very important issues having to do with causality. This is where science can help. I mean, I am somebody who's been funded by the NCI since 1998. But I don't have any resources to do the type of research that I am capable of doing to address causality in tissues or in animals or whatever kind of research one would want to do. We have the knowledge, we know what we should do, but we don't have the resources. So I think I've gone on long enough, and I'll